Hello guys, this is DerpN3rd coming at you with Kerbal for Noobs, Episode 2. And today we will be going through building your first rocket. Let us go into New Game. And we're going to go to the Vehicle Assembly Building. And it's night, so they're all lit up real pretty. So, your first decision for building a rocket is your command pod. Generally, I don't recommend the Mark 1, Mark 2, or Mark 3 cockpit for any rockets. Those are more for planes. The Mark 3 cockpit you could do a shuttle look-alike with, but we'll save that for when you're much more advanced. So, what I'd recommend are your options are the Mark 1-2, the Mark 1 lander can, the command pod Mark 1, and the Mark II lander can, because we actually want Kerbals to go into space. These are all probes, and they work great, but for your first rocket, let's stick with a cockpit. Alright? So we're just going to send one Kerbal into space in this classic command pod. And this was one of the first command pods that they introduced in these versions of the game. They had one beforehand. So now we have a command pod, and you notice you can click and drag it around. Now this is going to be your root part. And what that means is everything else you put on the rocket is based around this part. If you click on this part, it will move the whole rocket. So here are your different tabs. You have propulsion, control, structural, aerodynamic, utility, and science. Science you really won't use except for aesthetics. It can measure stuff, and there's really no point in it for the game. Even the antennas are useless. So we're going to go to propulsion, and in propulsion you'll find all your rockets, jets, and fuel tanks, including solid rockets, which we will probably use. You will also find reaction control system tanks, which are good for maneuvering in space. But for your first rocket you don't need RCS, as it's called. This is also a normal fuel tank, but we're not going to use that either. And this is the fuel line, which you can use to transfer fuel from one tank to another. But go back, you'll notice that these are next page and previous page tabs. You may or may not have them depending what resolution you're running the game at. And then we are going to look at the different buttons down here. So here's center of mass. If I click that, it'll show me where my center of mass is with the yellow thing. Center of lift, you won't really have to worry about for a rocket. It'll start out all the way down there, but for planes and stuff, you'll want to mess with that. Center of thrust, it will show you, for example, if I take a jet engine and I stick it on, I'll show you how to stick it on, it'll show me that that's where my thrust is coming from. It'll also balance a couple different rockets, and it'll show you what it will be before you place it, right? Right. All right. So scrolling your mouse wheel moves your view up and down. Holding right click moves it around. And if you hold middle click, it'll also make you zoom in and out. So right click moves you around. Also the plus and minus keys on your numpad zoom in and out. Holding middle mouse and moving it zooms you in and out. And then scrolling moves you up and down. You can also use the arrow keys to get different perspectives. Okay, so we're going to start by placing something on the rocket. And I'm just going to move it a little bit. So, center it. Okay, see these green nodes on the command pod? Those are attachment points. So normally you have to have attachment points to place something on there unless it can be radially mounted. And we'll go over that in a little bit. But these are really handy and you can snap stuff to it. So for example, to select a part you click on it, we're going to go to the next page and take the FLT800 fuel tank. And I'm just going to show you how to build a rocket. We'll go over everything afterward. Alright? So see how that snaps on when I drag the two nodes close to each other? You can click and it'll place it on your rocket. Alright, if you click on it again, you can take it off. And you can also set it to the side for a little while. If you want to delete it, you can hit your delete key on your keyboard or move it over here. I'll show you what these are in a minute, symmetry and angle snap. So You'll notice that if we do use center of mass and we take this off, it'll show us that our center of mass has moved downwards quite a bit. That's fine. So we're going to take 2 of these FLT 800 fuel tanks, and we're going to go back and we're going to take this LV T45 fuel tank. So this is your basic rocket. But we also probably should worry about getting the Kerbal back. So I'm going to take my actual rocket assembly, which consists of 2 fuel tanks and the rocket, and move it over here. I'm going to get rid of center of mass. We're going to come over to structural, and we're going to add a basic stage to it. And staging, basically, as you go through your flight, as in the Kerbal X that I used, you can hit the space bar and it'll activate different things. It'll detach empty fuel tanks, whatever you set it up to do. So we're going to go to the next page, and we're going to find the TR18A stack decoupler. This is the basic decoupler, and it's for 1 meter parts. Or 2 meter parts, sorry. Anyway, so there are a couple different part sizes. There's the, I'm not going to go by dimensions. There is huge, medium, there's big, medium, and small. And so I believe this is called a 3 meter. This is a 2 meter. And smaller stuff is ½ meter. But that's okay, you don't really need to know that. So what this does is this detaches you from the rest of a spacecraft. So everything above this will detach. So we're going to put the rocket back on underneath it and delete our fuel tank that I just pulled out randomly. We can get rid of center of thrust. Alright, so now we can detach our pod from the rocket once we're out of fuel. We'll probably want a parachute to save our Kerbal. So let's go to Utility, and you're probably going to have to go to the next page. And this is a very basic parachute, the Mark 16, that you can put on a very small point. Other parachutes you're welcome to use are these side-mounted ones. You notice how we don't need a node to place it? And you can put one of those on the back. But I'd recommend just having the one up top for now. Another thing in Utility, if you go back a page and you see this PB Nuke radioisotope thermoelectric generator. What this does is it generates an electric charge. Now the ship, to keep itself pointed in the direction you want, it's going to need electric charge. So because it uses reaction wheels, which are beyond the scope of this right now. So normally if you put it there, it'll just be pointing straight out, right? So what I want you to do is hit your W, S, A, or D keys until you get it how you want it to look. So that's W, that's S, that's A, that's D, E, Q. You get the idea. So say I want it like this. Now there's a problem because there's only one of them. So we could just take another one and place it on the other side and do the same thing. But you know, it may not be perfectly symmetrical. So how are we going to fix this? This is where symmetry mode comes in handy. If you click on your symmetry mode once, you'll see 2, again 3, 4, 6, and 8. So we're going to start with 2, and we're going to click on the radioisotope generator, and you'll notice already on the other side there's another generator. So we're going to place it, and now if we want to move it again, it'll still remember that they're connected. So that's really handy. So of course you could have done 3 or 4, but we don't want to cover the hatch so the Kerbal can get out. So this is our basic rocket, and we're actually going to go into structural and hit the next page and find the TT18A launch stability enhancer and place one of them or 2 on the side. So we're going to, you can right click on symmetry mode to lower it, or you can click all the way through. We're just going to put one of them on here. Alright, so now we're going to set up our staging. Our staging is on the far right here, and so you can hover over things and I'll show you what it activates. For example, right now, it stages in reverse order, so it's like 2, 1, 0. So first we'd hit the spacebar and it would detach our launch clamp. Second, it would fire our rocket. And third, it would detach and fire the parachute. So we want to set it up so our rocket lights at the same time as this lets go, or else we'd be falling. And we want to separate the detachment. Oh crap, I'm already getting ahead of you guys. We want to separate the detacher from the parachute. So you can drag and drop things. That's what I did previously. And if you hit the minus button on an empty stage, it'll get rid of it. If you hit a plus, as you just saw, it'll create a new stage, which you can drag stuff into. So we're going to minus that, and we want to create a new stage, and we'll put the decoupler in it. Another thing you can do is drag the stages around to change their order. In this, you click on the orange part and drag it around. So now we have a very basic rocket, and we're going to have to name it. So pick a name. I'm just going to call it the Noobish one. The Noobish one. And you can type a description down here for tutorial use. So you can come back and be like, oh, that's what I made that rocket for. We're going to ignore the Action Groups tab for now, but it does come in handy for more advanced rockets. But you can click on the crew. Now you should have the default Bill, Bob, and Jebediah Kerman. You can drag the guys around, or you can hit the check mark, and that'll pop them in the cockpit. And this is selecting which guys you want in the cockpit. So now, hit save and launch. I have started habitually saving because I've ran into stuff that I haven't saved and it's caused a big problem. Also, it's important to name it a little earlier on in the design process than that if you want to go away or something, because the default name is Untitled Spacecraft. And if you save one as Untitled Spacecraft, then you lose the last one. Alright, so let's use our basic flight controls again. Shift to bring the throttle up, T to activate the stability, which is why we have the generators on there, and we're going to hit space. And your rocket should start going up pretty handily. So now I'm going to show you generally basic rocket flight. I don't think this will make it into orbit, but we'll try. So generally, I wait until about 12,000 to start my gravity turn. And what the gravity turn is basically as we go up, we also want to gain horizontal speed so that we can obtain orbital velocity. So this rocket is accelerating, which is great. But if you have another rocket you make and it's accelerating too fast, you might want to throttle down, especially if you're seeing red reentry effects or even white effects, because that means you're basically wasting fuel against air resistance. So you can technically start your gravity turn as early as you want, but you have to be very careful. So I generally wait till we're out of this part of the atmosphere up here to do our gravity turn. And this is in place of the pointing straight up and then rolling over that we did with the Kerbal X. We're not going to get into orbit with this craft, but we're going to do a suborbital flight. So we're reaching about 10,000 meters now. And we're going to, so that pops out. That's the abort button. It actually won't do anything because you have to set that up yourself. And at about 12,000, I want you to start leaning over. And I generally lean over to about 60 degrees-ish. Doesn't have to be exact. And try and stay on 90. And wait for this prograde marker to move over to the center of your direction indicator. Ignore that the stars are different for you guys. I have a mod to do that. It won't affect the gameplay. So now the ball is in the center of where my indicator is, so lean down to about 45, and you should be just about out of this lighter blue, or this slightly darker blue area. And I want you to go to your map and check out your apoaps. Hit X once it gets above 100,000. I waited a little long. I waited a little too long. But M is for your map view again. And you can actually control the rocket from the map view by clicking this little thing down here. Alright, So I want you to point directly at the horizon. So that's where the blue meets the brown. And this will help us get orbital speed. And you can wait till you get close to this. So let's use some time warp. And I'm going to start burning about here. So point almost a little below the horizon. And keep it on 90. And burn for as much as you can until you run out of fuel. Because you will run out of fuel unless you did a much better job than me. And there we are. We're in space, and you've done your suborbital flight in your own rocket. And so now we're going to edit this rocket to make it orbit capable. So I used SAS the whole way. You don't have to, but it does help stability-wise. We're going to rotate our craft around to the the retrograde. And since we're already in a suborbital flight, we just have to wait to re-enter the atmosphere. So you can use time warp. Oh, ship is throttled up. I'm going to hit X to cut my throttle. So point towards retrograde. And once you're just about there, maybe a little bit above it, start time warping. And time warp will stop you, won't let you go past a certain limit at this height. And once you re-enter the atmosphere, it'll cut all time warp. Now you can time warp up to physical time warp. And you can ditch the stage before it. So we're going to hit the space bar and stage it. Let's see if we can get a better view of this. Okay. And now we're going to wait to activate our parachute. So now you can time warp till you're at about 30,000 meters. And you can hit spacebar for your parachute. You'll notice the really neat re-entry effects. And you can deactivate SAS and it'll kind of let itself do its thing. And so from here on, you really don't have to do anything. You could wait, or you could use time warp. The parachute should be out by now, and it is. You can see it up there with the re-entry effects. And you can time warp till you're at about 4,000, 5,000 meters. Because if you continue time warping all the way down, then you risk your parachute opening and ripping off from your spacecraft. So there's a good view, and go to your map, and it looks like we'll be landing in the ocean. I can't tell though. So the parachute will open 500 meters above ground level. So it can give you an indicator of where the terrain is. Sea level obviously is at 0, and we are landing on the sea. So the parachute's going to open to 500 meters, and you're welcome to time warp a little bit until you get there. So there goes the parachute, and now you can use full time warp until it gets like at 10 or 15 meters away from the ground, which in this case is at 0 meters. So I'm going to cut time warp. And this should hit the ground shortly, or above the ocean. And congrats! You've completed your first suborbital flight in a rocket you've actually designed. You can mess around with the pod by hitting them different keys or spinning it around. So we're going to hit escape, go back to the Space Center. And now this is a neat feature that they added in a recent update. We're going to go to the tracking station once we can. And we're going to recover the flight. And what this will do is it will take the parts and delete them, but it'll save the pilot. So here we go. We're going to hit recover. Yes, I'm sure. Recover. And now we can back out. And we're going to go back to the vehicle assembly building and make this craft orbit capable. Click on the vehicle assembly building. Alright, so we scroll up until we see our rocket. We're going to take off this launch clamp and set it to the side. And now we're going to add boosters. Now, Kerbal Space Program, one of its mottos, well, fan-made mottos, is more boosters, spelled M-O-A-R. Because a lot of times you can just give up and do that. So we're going to go to structural. And we're going to come over to the next page. And I like to use these TT70 radial decouplers because I'm going to demonstrate why I like them. look at how far away whatever we put on it is going to be away from the craft. If we put these on it, it's going to be right next to it, or even these. And what that space buys you is when you detach it, because it's a detacher, it's a decoupler, everything's going to fall away. But if you start turning or doing anything while it's falling away, you could smack your engine on whatever's falling off, and the engine could blow up. So that's why I like to use the TT70s. So we're going to use symmetry mode, and a handy hotkey for symmetry mode is X. You'll notice without clicking on it, I can toggle my symmetry mode, and Shift X will undo it. So I think 4 symmetry should be good, and you can pick up this part and put it on the lower part of your rocket. Alright, so we have 4 decouplers. So let's go to propulsion and stick some boosters on it. You have 2 options for boosters. You have the big ones, which are these guys, and sometimes that thing where it turns red happens. And what you can do then is you can pull away and try and put them back on. Or sometimes you can find a really weird spot to put them. Click, take it off, and put it back on. So we could do that, but I think that's a little overkill. These guys are pretty cool. I like these guys better for smaller rockets. So we're going to stick these guys on, and then we're going to take our launch clamps, and see that problem again? Another way you can do it is by hitting the symmetry key, and that will reset it. So hit X, and it'll reset it and see if it actually collides with anything. Don't worry about angle snap yet, but I'll just give you a brief example. So we'll take something that mounts on the side, right? And angle snap, you'll see it jumps to angles. So if we turn off angle snap, which you can actually toggle with the C key, if we get off of angle snap, it'll let you smoothly move it around. It'll just change the rotation. But if we see the difference, yeah, that's essentially the difference. So one other thing you may want to add under structural is an EAS4 strut connector. Struts hold rockets together, and they can break, but they reinforce everything. So to place a strut, you click on one part, and then you bring your mouse and click on another part that you want to attach it to. And what these will do, they will break when these decouplers fire, but they'll hold it to the rocket until then. So we're going to call this the Noobs.2. Same description. We're going to save it, and it will automatically put the first Kerbal to go into the rocket. So you don't have to do this. But since we already launched Jebediah, I think it's time to launch Bob. So we're going to save it, and we're going to launch it. This should be an orbit-capable craft. And what we're going to do is we're also going to... We forgot to do the staging, okay? I'll be honest with you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the staging on the launch pad. You can actually do this. It's a little more tedious. But you notice we have our boosters fire, decouple, and then we have the launch clamps let go. That's no good. So we're going to take the launch clamps and bring them down to when the boosters fire. And we're also going to take our normal rocket and put it down in that stage as well. So an interesting thing, these boosters you can't use the throttle on. Once you light them, they're always at full power. So the only thing the throttles will be controlling is this LVT45. But since the boosters are going to give you plenty of thrust, you only really need to throttle up a little bit. And that's so you can keep SAS, which we're going to activate now, can keep the rocket stable. So we're going to hit the space bar and launch this thing, and we're going to have it on 1/3 thrust. 3, 2, 1. And you notice it goes up a lot faster than the last one. You can actually bring your thrust down a little more. You want it barely on. You'll notice you can see how far the solid fuel has left. And once that gets really close, I'm going to throttle up all the way by holding shift, and I'm going to hit the space bar to get rid of that. So we're going to throttle up, and we're going to hit the space bar to get rid of them. So now, I'm going to continue. We can do this at full throttle, but you notice you'll slow down, and that's fine. That's because of the air resistance thing I was telling you about earlier. But with solid boosters, we can't do anything about that. Eventually, you'll start accelerating. So we need to get ready for our gravity turn, and we can start it now. So about 60, 65 degrees. I just overshot it, but that's okay. I'm actually going to go with 55 degrees because we're going pretty fast already. Try and stay on the 90 because you want a nice circular orbit. If you have it off the 90, it's going to mess up your flight and it's not going to be easy to rendezvous with them. So just check your map, and we're going to tilt down to about 45. So once we get this in orbit and we recover it again, then I think that'll end this tutorial of Kerbal for Noobs. So we're going to check our map, 40,000. So you can start keeling over to about 20 degrees now. Don't worry about that. That happens a lot of times when one fuel tank runs out and it starts on another one. The engine will make a funny noise. So let's be a little more careful about our apoapsis now. And I'm going to let just get above 80,000. 70,000 is the atmosphere height. And we're going to stay at around 20 degrees of lift. Actually, I think I'm going to move it to about 10. Alright guys, sorry about that. There was a recording error. Lost about 4 minutes of footage. That's okay. It's 70,000. You notice I'm going around 5-10 degrees, and we want to bring this out of the atmosphere enough that we'll have time to burn. So over 80,000 is good. You notice your apoapsis is actually dropping a little bit, and that's because you're still in the atmosphere, hitting a little air resistance. So let's time warp up to here. And once you're in space, which is 70,000, you can actually use the other time warp, not the physics warp. So we should be in space. So I'm going to warp up to about here. And you have to start your burn earlier if you have lower thrust to weight ratio, but here should be fine for us. So we're going to point prograde, and then we're going to burn. And I'm going to point a little underneath the horizon because our apoapsis is ahead of us. So now, once your apoapsis is almost on you, you can just point prograde. So just keep burning until you get a periapsis. There's our periapsis, and now we want to bring it above the atmosphere, so at least 70,000. And there we are, we're above the atmosphere, we're in orbit. You can quick save if you want, there's really no need. Because if you want, you can complete a full orbit, but, so now I'm going to burn down, I'm going to get back in the atmosphere and land. So to do that, first I have to burn retrograde. And I'm going to burn until our periapsis is somewhere between 25 and 35 kilometers so that we can go for aero capture. You can actually click on the periapsis once, and I think 30 should be good for our purposes. So now you can warp around, and I'm going to detach it once I'm in the atmosphere. Mind you, it doesn't matter how steep you come in on Kerbin, but on places like Duna, you need as much time in the air for the air resistance to kick in before you hit the ground. So I'm going to time warp, use a physics time warp, and once we get, I don't know, maybe down to 60, we'll detach the stage thing. Oh, that was interesting. Saw something. Could have sworn I saw something there. So around 60, we'll detach our rocket part. We still have some fuel we could have used, but we don't need it anymore, so we're dumping that. And I still have time warp on, so it should dump pretty quickly. Some nice sights as you're coming in. And this should auto-align with retrograde if you turn SAS off, like I have. Unless you have some weird stuff on the front, and then it might point forward. It does that based on, basically the lowest drag end points that way. Looks like we'll be landing on land, and you'll notice your periaps and apoapsis are both coming down. This should eventually be on you, and this should eventually disappear. So right now we're aero braking, and we're basically using the air to slow us down. This wouldn't be so good if they actually had re-entry heat. We'd have to be very, very careful and have like heat shields and stuff. Alright, there we go. Periapsis is gone, and apoapsis will slowly move over to us. I'm going to deploy the parachute. Maybe we'll land on land, hopefully. See, you'll notice we're slowing down. You can swap to surface and look at your surface speed if you want. Okay. So now we're really starting to slow down. Yeah, we're definitely landing on land. Should start getting re-entry effects. And as you're getting those, your parachute should pop around 22,000? 23. Good, we're going to land on land. So basically from here on out, you just wait till you think you're little more than 500 meters above the surface, and then you stop time warp so your parachute doesn't rip off, just like we did last time. So, neat trick, if you zoom out, your thing will stop at the terrain. So you'll see this start falling. See, that's what I wanted you guys to avoid. Anyway, I didn't stop the time warp fast enough, and the parachute ripped off. So, I'm going to revert flight, but hopefully you guys stopped time warp in time, and you can go back and recover. If it was a failure, you can always revert and try again. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, and I hope this was proved useful to you. Take care.